X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to Battle of the Atom. This is the podcast where we rank every X-Men story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Zach. And you know what? We got an interesting show today, don't we, Adam?
We sure do, because we have a very special guest joining us today.
I want to tell a quick story about this special guest that I don't think I've told you, and obviously he wouldn't know because why would he? But there was a time, it was about 2 years ago, and I was officiating a wedding for a couple of my friends down in Cincinnati, Ohio. And it was a great wedding. Everything was, fine and spectacular. And we went to the reception, and it was a bunch of people from college. Everyone had a little bit to drink, and then everyone had a little bit more to drink. Then we went out to a bar, and everyone had a little bit more to drink. And then I woke up in my hotel room, and my wife was there, and one of my friends was sleeping in our windowsill. My phone had 1% battery, and before it died, I looked at it. It was one of those things where it's going to die. You can tell it's dying, but you get that last second, and I see it right as I wake up, and it says, new email from Cullen Bunn, and I'm like, that's the guy who writes Uncanny X-Men. I'm probably drunk still, and I put it down, and I tried to figure out what was going on with the rest of the day, and then it turns out that that was a real email, and then got to talk to Cullen Bunn for one of the first interviews I did for Xavier Files as a website, and now he's here on the podcast. Cullen, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
That's exciting. We've got some questions for you, and we'll get into it. But right now you are from an X-Men standpoint, which is where we're selfishly pay the most attention, writing X-Men Blue, and you've got a bunch of creator-owned stuff that I think for some people flies under the radar, for especially people who mostly know you for your Marvel work. What do you got running right now? I know Harrow County is it just ending, or does it still got one more issue left?
No, the last issue of Harrow County came out this last week. So I'm confused on what day of the week it is. I think I had one of those nights like you just described last night. We were celebrating my wife's birthday, but the last issue of Harrow County came out last week, so it is all wrapped up.
Awesome, and you got who all do you have work for right now getting released?
So stuff that's currently coming out, I do stuff for Boom. I have a book called Bone Parish that's a sort of a supernatural crime story that's coming out or I guess it's July now, so it comes out this month from Boom, the first issue. And I do stuff for Marvel still. I do a little bit for DC here and there. Like I think this month I have a Suicide Squad annual that's coming out for DC. And I do a lot of stuff for Oni Press, which was the publisher that gave me my first break into comics. I still do a book called The Damned for them, and I do a book called Shadow Roads for Oni Press as well. But yeah, I work with a lot of different publishers, and that's just leaving out all the stuff that's unannounced or that I've been developing with other publishers. There's a few publishers coming up that I've never worked with before. So I'm excited about that. We just haven't announced the property yet.
Awesome. No, that's cool to hear. I know, I frequent message boards and stuff, and one of the jokes I always see is that Cullen Bunn's probably one of the hardest working guys in comics because he's got so much stuff coming out week after week.
Well, I have to hustle, man. It's a I think there are actually people that are doing a lot more than I am, probably, especially right now. But yeah, there was a time there where I'm certain I had more books coming out than just about anybody else. But I jokingly say that is because it took me a while to break into comics, and now I'm trying to make up for lost time.
So, do you sleep? What's your work habit in terms of like getting page counts done for a given week? Do
I
you
work
break it down and say, "I've got to get this done"?
well, I do. That's an everyday thing, but yeah, I work 7 days a
Mhm.
week, and on weekdays that's usually about 10 hours, sometimes a little more than that.
Wow.
And on
Wow.
weekends it's usually 5-6 hours a day. But yeah, I work every day of the week.
That's impressive.
Now,
I mean, I'm wired that way. I've you know I just I enjoy work. And when I say I work 12 hours a day, the beauty of freelancing is if my family wants to go out and get lunch, I can go get lunch with my family and then just
Mhm.
come back and make up the time. So it's it's a flexible 12 hours, but but I try to get, or I mean, it's flexible, it's flexible time, but I try to get that work in.
So, Colin, I think in fairness, we've had your arch nemesis Dennis Hopeless on the program before.
That guy.
So, considering we're talking about other writers, we just thought we'd give you an opportunity. We did ask him when he was on the show why he hates you so much.
What did
So,
Dennis
can you?
Hopeless say? What did he say?
it was like 8 months ago. I don't remember. I'm gonna be very
I'm pretty
honest.
sure. I'm pretty sure he just said some really nice things about you. But
Well,
why
now
do
I
you
have to
hate
say
Dennis
nice
Hopeless
things
so
about
much?
him. No. Yeah, Dennis is actually one of my best friends in comics, so I'm not going to say anything bad about him unless it's in jest. But we have fostered this sort of rivalry on social media that I think a lot of people genuinely believe. Um, I mean, I've said things in interviews, and Dennis has too, and then people respond back saying, "Why are you so mean to Dennis Hopeless?" or "Why are you so mean to Cullen Bunn?" And but
Oh.
we've been friends for quite a while now. He's uh, of most of the creators of all the creators out there, I talk to Dennis probably more than any other, uh, uh, on a pretty regular basis. So
I love that online it's like a rivalry, but then in reality it's like a bromance. It's really nice.
that's yeah. Well, yeah. One day it will turn to a bitter rivalry. I'm just preparing for that. You know? It's comic books. Eventually, you're gonna hate the other person at some point. So I'm just getting ready for the time I'll hate Dennis Hopeless for everything he stands for.
That's
That's great.
beautiful. That's beautiful. So we're an X-Men podcast, and you've written a fair chunk of X-Men at this point in your career.
Yeah.
So, what's your X-Men origin story? Was that something that before they paid you money to do it, you were into, or?
Yeah, no. So I remember posting on, I think, like the comic book resources forum or something at some point, maybe a year or two before I started writing Uncanny X-Men. Someone had said, would you ever be interested in writing an X-Men comic? And I had said at that point, I said, yeah, I'd love to, but I can't imagine that ever happening. And that's really because when it comes to superhero books, X-Men is the book that I mean, it wasn't the first superhero comic I read, but it was the book that really that was my go-to superhero comic. And X-Men means a lot to me because when I was a young comic book collector, um, my dad, who was not into comics at all, and I decided that we were going to collect a run of X-Men together. Um, my dad didn't
Oh,
like
wow.
comics, or didn't read comics, but he loved going to conventions and going to stores, and he loved haggling with uh, comic book dealers and trying to get the best deal. And he loved, trying to fill out a collection of books. So my dad and I collected Uncanny X-Men together, and built up a run of that series. Um, so so that the book means a lot to me from that perspective, but also I love the book. I ended up selling that run of comic books to pay for college, and now I'm desperately
wow.
trying to recollect them.
Wow.
But no. So when they came to me about X-Men, it was a surprise, and yeah, I was I was thrilled to have the chance to write that story.
Now, when you got started, correct me if I'm wrong, the first book that you did was the Magneto solo. Is that right, Colin?
Yeah, the first thing in the X universe. I mean, some people count Deadpool as an
Mm-hmm.
X-Men book, but if you really, like, I don't really count X-Men Deadpool as X-Men. So the
No.
first X-Men book I did was Magneto.
So I love that run. I just want to start with that. But Magneto is featured, really prominently in both, obviously in the solo run, but again in your Uncanny X-Men run. And then he became sort of the Charles Xavier of the X-Men Blue run. What about Magneto has really stuck with you to make him the through line through, all of your X work?
Well, I really, I've always liked the character, but when I started writing him in the Magneto solo series, I kind of fell in love with the character, and just really, I enjoy writing him. I enjoy that, I one of the things I think comic books have a problem with right now, superhero comics have a big problem with, is that they turn all the villains into heroes, and then they have no villains anymore. But,
Mm-hmm.
Magneto, I know he has been heroic, but Magneto is a villain, and he always will be. And I don't care what anybody says. Magneto's a villain, and I like that about him. I like that he's a villain that you can understand his motivations. I like that he's not just a villain who just wants to conquer the world. I mean, that might have been his motivation from time to time, but he has reasons for doing what he does. There's a darkness inside him that I think readers can understand, because if they were put through anything similar, that darkness would be there, in them as well. And I've just always liked that that aspect of Magneto. And when I started writing Magneto, I had an arc in mind for the character, and it was a much longer arc than I could possibly get done in the in the confines of a 21 issue comic book series like Magneto.
Mm-hmm.
So when Magneto ended, thanks to Secret Wars, and Uncanny X-Men came about, I really lobbied to put Magneto in that team as well. And the same thing happened when Uncanny X-Men ended, and X-Men Blue was the next thing on the list. I lobbied to put Magneto in X-Men Blue in a big way, because I still have this arc for the character that I'm trying to get.
Do you
get
feel
through.
like you're going to get that opportunity to finish that arc, or do you think maybe we're going to leave off before you get to the finish?
Yeah, no, I think my arc with my time with Magneto is, I think,
Okay.
done now. And yeah, in the last few issues of X-Men Blue, I think I get to I tell the story I wanted to tell with Magneto and go where I wanted to go with the character.
That's awesome.
For the most part. I mean, things change, along the ways, thanks to, things that are happening in other books and in the Marvel universe as a whole. But yeah, I think I've taken Magneto where I wanted to take him. Do I have more stories with Magneto? Absolutely. But, those may never be told.
Okay.
As of recording this, we've got 6 issues left in X-Men Blue, and spoilers for people who aren't caught up on it yet, but there is solicited to be a big showdown between Magneto and Emma Frost that I know a lot of people are very excited for, having read that book. Now, speaking about X-Men Blue, I know when we had Dennis Hopeless on the show, and I wasn't intending to keep bringing him up, but he was mentioning that after IVX, when the line kind of got shook up and people switched books, everyone, he said that he really wanted to jump onto the Jean Grey book. So what made X-Men Blue,
Yeah.
which, ostensibly was, the '05 Time Displaced X-Men book, what made them an appealing place to continue to tell your stories?
Do you want the honest answer?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think this is any secret to anybody involved. I didn't want the book. I didn't want the original 5.
Okay.
When they called me and told me that that's what was going to happen, I was furious.
Whoa.
I really didn't. I thought it gutted what I was trying to do with Uncanny X-Men. And you know, I had respect for the original 5 characters, but they weren't my X-Men team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thing I always loved about, you know, the thing that drew me to X-Men was the weirdness of the team and the you know, the off the wall nature of the groups that were put together. And the original 5 didn't fit that, you know, my vision of what I loved about the X-Men. And you know, there was a lot of discussion about it. You know, I lobbied for a different team. I put a different team. You know, I suggested a completely different team of characters. But it came down that at the time, Axel Alonso, the editor in chief, you know, he got on the phone. I remember very clearly. I was in San Diego at the time, and he got on the phone with me, and he said, "It's the 05 or nothing."
Ooh.
After I'd had several calls with him, you know, several calls where they were trying to convince me. And so when they said that, I was like, all right, can I put Magneto on the team?
Mm-hmm.
And when they agreed to let me put Magneto on the team, or in the book, I said, all right, I'll tackle the book and see what I can do. And, you know, my plan was just to take it and do, you know, the kind of X-Men stories I just wanted to do anyway, but I'd be forced to use the 05. Since that time, you know, I've come to, I really like these characters a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that I'm doing this book. They're still not the, you know, it's, if you're an X-Men fan, you like a certain type of X-Men group, you know, and it all depends on when you came into the book and everything. So I can never say that the 05 is my type of X-Men group, but I do like writing the characters, and I'm pretty happy with the way the book has turned out. But yeah, initially, you know, if I'm being completely honest, I railed against it.
Wow.
I was not thrilled about it.
Well, I think that stems to another question that we wanted to put to you, which is that not only do you have line shakeups, you know, where Uncanny X-Men has to end, and then we have to start X-Men Blue, X-Men Gold, etc. But you also had some editorial mandates that broke up even X-Men Blue storytelling. You know, you had during your Uncanny run, I believe you had the Apocalypse War thing, which wasn't a crossover, but you know, just was part of a line wide event. And then in X-Men Blue,
Right.
you had to work your way into Secret Empire. How do you deal with some of those sort of larger tag on the front cover type things?
Well, if you're writing a book for Marvel and it's going to be a book that's more than, you know, 5 issues long, you just have to understand that that's going to happen.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not something that you can avoid. There are times where editorial will call you and they'll ask, do you want to be a part of, you know, whatever the event is, you know? And in some cases, you know, it's a completely, you know, it's all about the sales of the book. When you slap one of those banners on the cover, the sales of the book go up. And if a book needs that, then you do it, you know, for that reason. But most of the time, at least the stuff that I have been doing, it's been, you know, we want you to participate in this event or be part of, you know, this story. And what you have to do, and what I've always tried to do, is take the, you know, take whatever the event is and tell my own story within the confines of that. You know, sometimes it's more difficult than others, and sometimes I'm more successful than others. You know, but I try to tell, you know, the story I want to tell. And yes, there's, you know, there's this big event going on, but I'm trying to tell something that's, you know, maybe happening a little closer to the characters, or, you know, happening on the fringe of the event. and sometimes, sometimes I'm real happy. Like when Magneto, for instance, we had to tie into Axis. And something that came out of Axis was, there's a character called Hitzig, who is this Nazi SS officer who tormented Magneto when he was a kid, and Hitzig really kind of came into his own in that, with Axis, and I really, I'm glad that happened so that I could introduce this character of Hitzig, because he recurs in the Magneto series a little bit, and he becomes a character that really sticks it to Magneto in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thankful for that. If it can introduce some new element to the story, that's great. And sometimes you just sometimes it really shakes things up, like X-Men Blue. The whole world is turned upside down basically, and I had to fit fit my story into into the world being kind of turned on its ear suddenly, and I know that I had a few readers who were like, "We have no idea what's going on."
Well, and because it was only 2 issues, right? I think
2 or 3, I can't remember at this point, but yeah, it's they're short little bursts, but in some cases you can tell a story that's close, that the reader doesn't have to follow everything, but with something like Secret Empire, when the mutants are now all living in California, and things like that, it was really difficult to tell a story that didn't kind of derail things a little bit.
So recently, you tied in a couple of books that you were writing. I'm thinking of the Venom, the big Poisons story you were talking in Venom, tying that in with X-Men Blue. What was driving the decision part of that, and what I'm curious, as as a fan of this stuff. I'm an X-Men guy. That's been my thing. And while I watched the Spider-Man cartoon every Saturday morning in 1990, so I have a certain affection for Venom. He's not the first or second or third thing I think of pairing up with the X-Men. So what was going on behind that?
So yeah, I was writing X-Men Blue, and I wrote a mini series called Venomverse, which was sort of a crazy story with a bunch of different Venoms. And that all wrapped up, and then I got a call from my editors, and they said, "Hey, we want to bring you out to New York. We want to talk to you about this. You're going to tie X-Men and Venom together for a 5-issue storyline." So I was a little bit. I had the same reaction you just described, where I'm like, well, I fitting those two together is not going to be easy. But I think what drove it is I had pitched at the end of Venomverse. I had pitched a sequel to Venomverse, which became the book Venomized. And I think Marvel wanted to have a bridging story between Venomverse and Venomized. It wasn't my initial, intent. I didn't intend for the X-Men to play, as the role they played. And I didn't intend for Venomized to become what is really an X-Men story, but that Marvel wanted a bridging story to tie the two characters together, or the two books together. So yeah, they flew me out, and we they asked me to pitch what I would do to put the X-Men and Venom on the same team.
That's interesting. What I think for me is more interesting is how that ended up impacting X-Men Blue, because we get this wildly different team out of it for an arc that, honestly, it was the culmination of a lot of stuff that was building up for the rest of X-Men Blue. Now that team was, it was Daken, Polaris, Zorn,
Jimmy, Bloodstorm, and Gazing Nightshade.
How does that cast of characters? Because look, I love Zorn. Zorn's like one of my favorite guys in the world, but I think it's me and 3 other people who are big Zorn fans. So how in the world did you pull together that team to, tie up that story?
Well, it was all sort of a happy accident, because when I was brought out and we pitched X-Men Black, or I think that's what we ended up calling it, right? Or no, they call it Poison X. It was originally going to be X-Men Black, is what the title was going to be. And they were all going to be in,
Do you know how many people on a message board are freaking out because they've been trying to solve some made-up mystery about X-Men Black for like 8 months now?
Well, that's what it was. It was a title that someone threw out, and it became Poison X. So originally, the idea was that story would take place. The X-Men would return back to Earth and would continue on into the Mothervine story. But because of weird scheduling things, and I can't even begin to explain it to you. At one point, I had wrapped my head around why the schedule was working the way it was. I was told you can't bring the X-Men back because of Venomized. I couldn't bring the X-Men back until Venomized launched. So I had to think of something to do in between, in those several issues where the X-Men were still off in space. And I'm sure you guys remember, because you're such X fans, there was this issue of X-Men where Forge puts together his own team of X-Men, and it's like Forge and Thunder and Polaris, I think, is on the
Muir
team.
Island rejects.
Yep.
Yeah, and I called my editor and I said, "Do you remember this cover? Let's do this cover on the book, and let's just do a weird team of X-Men." And I had to pull in Jimmy and Bloodstorm because they were still on Earth, because they only wanted the original 5 in space. Who knows? I don't know why. They only wanted the original 5 in space. So I pulled them in, and Polaris I had already hinted at was going to be there, and Zorn had already appeared in the book he had appeared in Uncanny X-Men a little bit, and I love Zorn. And to be honest,
so good.
I'll tell you what I like most about Zorn is he's wonderful to troll your editors with. He's so awesome because he presents such a horrible, mixed up continuity problem. Yep. Is he Magneto? Is he not Magneto? Was he Magneto? All that.
Is he a guy pretending to be Magneto, pretending to be himself?
Right. I mean, it's so convoluted. I've always loved Zorn. I think if for no other reason, the design of Zorn is amazing.
So good.
And
it's so good.
So I have been trolling editors with Zorn forever, threatening them that you do realize that Magneto and Zorn were the same person. I don't care what anybody else says. And and I do little things like that. There's a moment in X-Men Blue where Toad is just talking to Zorn like he knows him, because Toad was Magneto's little flunky in that Planet X story. And Zorn looks over him and says, "Who do you think I am?" But so besides the fact that I just think Zorn's a cool character, he's fun to troll editors with. And so I wanted to put him back in the book because I had left after IVX, Zorn was sort of left in limbo,
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to kind of wrap that story up a little bit, or wrap up at least what I could with Zorn, even though it's still not wrapped up yet.
Wait. Hold on.
Yeah.
Because last I saw, he exploded into his own head, which I know hasn't stopped him before, but...
He did, but Zorn also was left in charge of all these mutants from Uncanny X-Men, these sleeper mutants. And I, unlike everyone else, will not forget those little storylines, especially when I'm the one who introduced it. So that's still out there somewhere. That little, that nugget is still out there. What happened to those sleeper mutants? So we're gonna address that at some point in the next couple of issues. It was just a weird team I wanted to pull. I just said, well, let's just pull this weird team together. And the Daken was not on my team. My editor, or the senior editor, called me and asked, "Would you mind putting Daken on the group?" And I was like, "Well, we already have Jimmy." So anyway, I had this weird team, and unfortunately, because we knew the book was going to be, we knew X-Men Blue was going to be ending.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I'd set up all this stuff for this Mothervine story. I had to tell that story. So this weird team had to deal with the story that I'd always intended the blue team to handle. So that's that all played out in a weird kind of way. I turned it into some story elements and some character elements, but yeah, that it was unintentional, and it just sort of happened because of the scheduling issues.
Okay.
Now, speaking of an interesting team, one of the things you do early on in the blue run is introduce the Raksha. So would you talk a little bit about creating them and, where they came from and how that idea came about?
Yeah, and the Raksha are characters that I'd love to have had the chance to do more with. They came up, initially, it came up because of the way artists were coming in and off the book. We only had one issue that this artist, could do, and I decided I wanted to make it a Madripoor issue. And I said, well, Madripoor's never really had a real, team of superheroes. So I created these characters, the Raksha, who basically love Patch so much that they decided to be vigilantes in Patch's honor. And at one time they all wore patches on their face, but I took that out because of something Dennis Hopeless had done in his X-Men, all new X-Men run, and I didn't want it to echo that too much.
Where he had a bunch of people wearing Cyclops masks on their face.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I said, well, we can't do patches on their face. So, but I wanted a team of superheroes or mutant superheroes in Madripoor. I like the idea that it was an Asian team of heroes and that we could do some weird things with them and have some interesting, characters. My intent was always for them to play a much bigger role in the series and maybe even outside the series. And maybe one day they will. But they never had the play that I wanted them to in the book. There was a moment where I was going to have them, a huge training montage where they're training the X-Men to be ninjas and, all sorts of different weird things. But the only one that's they're not dead. They look like they got killed by Polaris.
They didn't look like they were in good shape.
Yeah, they're still around, and they will show up before the series ends again, at least in some capacity. But yeah, I always and I always will want to do more with them if I can.
Great.
Oh, it's exciting. So the big thing we touched on it a bit, but for your run was the Mothervine arc, which I finally got resolved in 28 or something like that. It had been building from the beginning of Blue.
Yes,
but that's not really where it started, because that was a plot element all the way back from the Ultimate Comics Wolverine series that you wrote with Jimmy Hudson. Which, I'll tell you, when I flipped that, I was like, wait a minute, this is a late Ultimates miniseries that I don't know what the sales were, but it was a late Ultimates comics book, so I'm not sure they were. I don't know if it was number one or not, but
I forget nothing.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out, you have added stuff like that in so many obscure continuity bits in there. Like Mach 2 is a big part of that run, and Mach 2 is a character that when I was reading those books, I said, oh, she's great. She's mini snotty Magneto, but she kind of has a point. I think that's awesome. I hope someone brings her back at some point. And then
she's awesome, except I always write Mach 5 when I'm scripting Mach 2 pages, and so many artists hate me now because I write Mach 5 and they draw this dude in armor from Thunderbolts. So there are so many pages of X-Men Blue where there's this dude in armor standing there instead, and I have to have him go back and patch it because I wrote the wrong name.
Because Because he's objectively one of the funniest characters in like visual comedy.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
but yeah, no, I don't forget these things, and when I don't write for a short game usually, and I try to think of the comics I loved when I was when I was reading comics just for the pure joy of reading comics. And I loved long, convoluted plot lines that tied into everything. It's just what I liked. And with X-Men, I'm maybe I'm just maybe it's fan service to me and me alone, but that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing.
Because I mean, at a certain point in this run, like you took them to A2099,
Yes.
and like no one thinks about those characters. Like Metalhead, no one cares about Eddie. When he shows up,
Yeah. No. Well, I do.
he's great. He's a guy named Metalhead who dresses like a roadie and is named Eddie, like Iron Maiden's freaking zombie boy. It's
right.
He's the perfect design for an incredibly specific subset of perfect. But yeah, those little continuity like nuggets. I mean, obviously, as people who do an X-Men podcast, we dig those. I know there is a certain segment of very intense fans who dig that stuff, and it's just figuring out where all
Yeah.
that comes from and how anyone just picks this weird offbeat bit of continuity. Say, oh, I want to build a 28 issue run around this thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to be one of those creators who tries to hide the fact that he loves comic books. And I think there are far too many creators out there who turn their nose up at the fact that they love comics. And I love X-Men. I always have. It's impossible for me to follow the continuity of everything. I mean, there are things in the X-Men that I have no idea. Someone will tell me, well, this happened. And I'm like, when did that happen? When did, I don't even know what it would be, but many times I've asked, my editors, how did I miss this and when did it happen? But, I love the X-Men and this is what I love about the X-Men is the weirdness and the strangeness. I love things like X-Men 2099 and Mutant X and, District X. Where's my District X comic? Because, I love District X when it was, things like that. Those books, are books that I loved every aspect of the X-Men. And I still, I still do, and if I were ever to write more X-Men comics, I'm not going to turn my nose up on the fact that that's the kind of stuff I like to do. And, I'm going to keep doing it. And yes, some of it is absolutely it's absolutely for the diehard X-Men fans, I guess, but that's okay.
It's appreciated.
That's all right.
Diehard X-Men fans of comics.
So speaking of your love for the line, the love for X-Men, I think when we spoke to Dennis, in his capacity as the writer of All New X-Men, he shared with us that there was an original plan for what was supposed to happen to the 05 before he came on board All New X-Men. We have a mini series coming up that I guess is going to deal with it. I don't know if that's the end, quote unquote, or what we're dealing with, but I'm curious, have you had any input in sort of swaying what ultimately happens to the 05 given your run on X-Men Blue?
Well, this book, X-Men Blue, was intended to wrap the story of the original 5, the time lost original 5. They were going to, by the end of the original pitch for the series, took care of the conundrum they present. There were things I wanted to do. I see all the message boards about, they're just alternate universe characters, blah, 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 things like that. And I wanted to put that to rest and say, nope, they're the real deal. These are Euro 5. That may be if I have any, now with everything that's going on, if I had any influence on, what the next stage of these characters is. It's that I just drew a line in the sand and said, no, they're the original characters. Because Dennis wrapped it up very neatly in that he said basically in his run that they were alternate universe characters. They go back to their timeline and the X-Men are there. They're there doing their thing. So the original 5 say, hey, we're off the hook. We can go back to, the future and live our lives. And I took that and said, nope, they're still the original. They're the original characters. and now I can tell you that, no, I have no input on what, besides the fact that they're the original characters. Your guess is as good as mine in what's happening next. Okay. I can tell you that my original plan pitched years ago when I took X-Men Blue was at the end of the book, X-Men Blue would become Exiles, and that team would become a new Exiles team. But that is not in any way, shape, or form what's happening.
Well, I
don't know, or at least I don't think so.
I just want to make sure that that I think Cross Time Caper, that arc was one of my absolute favorites. I love the idea. I'm a big Future Brotherhood fan, so.
Well, we're on a podcast called Battle of the Atom. I think we might like the Future Brotherhood.
When they appeared as the things to come in the first issue, I fell out of my chair. I was like, this is going to be so awesome when this finally happens. And the way that you worked it in to what Hopeless had left dangling in All New I thought it was brilliant. So bravo to that.
Oh yeah, it was. Please don't mistake me saying, no, I'm going to change what Dennis did was not a matter of me wanting to, shut down Dennis's story. It's just I saw such a great opportunity for the Future Brotherhood to be mucking around in the timeline again. And, I was like, well, let's do that. That's, so yeah, because I love those characters, even though I treated them so badly at the end. Or did I?
Well,
Who knows? Maybe they're still
really
around.
See what Magneto did. So.
And we all know that Magneto never follows through on his threats. So,
well, that's exciting. So, we're getting near the end here. But one of the things I wanted to ask, you've dove into so many just weird mutants in this. Has there been anyone that was so weird, so off the wall, and you just couldn't find a space to get them into any of your work on X-Men?
Wow, there's probably a huge list. I mean, if you look at my notes from going back to Uncanny X-Men, I had such a massive list of characters I wanted to do something with, and I have pitched stories that would, just way too ambitious, things that I knew Marvel wouldn't take. At the time, I pitched stories that starred every mutant in every, that's ever appeared would have a role to play in these stories and things. So, I want to do, use all these characters. Off the wall, though, that's I think I tried to bring Maggot back a couple of times.
Zach just fainted.
And editors didn't like Maggot coming back, although I think he's coming back now in Rosenberg's run, or he's appeared. I mean, I've saw somewhere there's this one fan who, and maybe
it's me. That's 100% me. Yeah, there we go.
Constantly emails me about Maggot.
I never email. I will never email someone about that. But
I did see that guy posted on Twitter thanking Rosenberg for Maggot. So I think Maggot must be back in that book or coming back.
He did show up in one panel on a dream sequence thing.
It's a dream sequence? All right. Well, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Maggot was one. And there's a lot of characters that I wanted to use that wouldn't have been off the wall. I mean, I've always wanted Nightcrawler. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've fought for Nightcrawler to be in my books. Rachel Gray, Magic, Nate Gray. Those are characters that I've wanted to do something with that it's just never been able to work out. I feel very, to me, that's the stuff that those are the moments that I miss most, is like, man, I'm never going to get that chance. And I mean, never say never, but I'm never going to get that chance to put, Nate Gray and Maggot in a team up book in District
Oh my God.
X.
That hits a
Sage was another character I'd love to have done something with. So there's a lot of characters out there that again, there's hundreds of mutants, and I love all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said about 1 million times on this podcast, there's 1,000 X-Men characters out there, and every single one of them is somebody's favorite.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's ridiculous. So now I think is the part in the interview that we're going to jump over to some Twitter questions. We put out the call earlier this evening and got a few things in. So let's go to town. Let's see.
First question: where is Maggot?
I didn't ask my own Twitter questions, and I have refrained from asking creators that, except for Leah Williams. But she loves Maggot too, so it was okay. No, the first question comes from Chris Hansen, who asks, what contribution to the overall X-Men mythos are you most proud of?
Wow.
Yeah, we're going heavy.
Look, I think I made a mark on Magneto. I feel like when it's all said and done, I will have told one giant Magneto story disguised as Magneto and 2 X-Men books. And I'm very happy with where that Magneto story ends, and really where it began. Yeah, probably Magneto, and by way of teasers, probably Magneto and the people that are surrounding him at the end of my run.
That'll be interesting. Now, speaking of the people surrounding him and how that has changed and progressed over the last couple of years, Matt_Sibley asks, how do you balance carrying story threads and characters across multiple books and needing to adjust those to fit with different tones of different books or different story decisions that have driven things?
Well, sometimes they have to, those plans and those characters do have to change or take a back seat where they were intended to be, front row, front and center stage, things like that. So it's just, I try not to forget these elements that I introduce. And even if I can only do sort of a casual nod to those elements, I want to at least keep them in mind and wrap up loose ends where I can. Not that I think every loose end needs to be wrapped up, because I do like leaving things for other creators to come in and do what they want to do. There were a few though that slipped. For instance, this is the one I regret more than anything. In IVX, there's a moment where, in my issues of IVX, Phantom X, who's also a character I love, even though a lot of people hate him, Phantom X wanders off into the world, which is this, sub-dimensional Sentinel factory, and he connects with the world in a big way. And at the end, he says, now this place is mine. I had a huge story envisioned for Phantom X as king of, of that world, that Sentinel factory, and what would happen, and where that would go. And unfortunately, that's a story that will never get told. It was going to be a huge part of Uncanny X-Men going forward, after IVX, but then the book ended. And then another writer. This is, it's just shared universe, so that's, and that's fine. Another writer took Phantom X and did other things with him, but that was always my intent, is that there's a bigger story out there involving the world and Phantom X and where he was at the end of that, that arc.
And I mean, I can tell you, I really enjoyed the Phantom X parts of IVX.
Mhm.
Those were exciting, and I wanted to see what's next. And while I definitely enjoyed what Charles Soule did in Astonishing X-Men, I can't say I'm not a little disappointed that we didn't get to see what was going to go on with that fake French guy living in his Sentinel planet.
Yeah. So all I can do is try to balance it as best I can. The thing I can't control are other moving pieces that are out there that can really mess things up.
Yeah. All right. We got, let's see, just a couple more. This one comes to us from hashtag Harrow County Forever, who asks,
my favorite one.
would you like to work with Tyler Crook again in the future on Harrow County related or unrelated projects? Or would you like to visit that world from another character's perspective?
No, I'm not saying I wouldn't mind to visit Harrow County from another, with another artist or something, but that would not be a permanent thing by any means. If I revisit Harrow County, Tyler's my go-to, ride or die on that book, and absolutely 1,000% yes, I would work with. I would fall all over myself to work with Tyler Crook on another project. He's a great collaborator, wonderful human being, and those are great qualities. Those are the qualities I look for in long-term collaborators, and I'd work with them in a heartbeat.
Exciting. Our last question comes to us from Kansas City native and friend of the show Chris Edelman, who asks, when Cullen comes to Kansas City, what barbecue does he get?
That's a wonderful question. So I don't get to Kansas City as I come about once or twice a year, and I don't get Kansas City barbecue probably as much as someone from Kansas City would like. I grew up in North Carolina, and North Carolina barbecue is drastically different than the barbecue here in the Midwest, and drastically superior.
He's throwing it down.
But sorry to say that, but I'm also, maybe I'm not going to the right places. Every time I go to Planet Comic-Con, which is one of my favorite conventions, I have a friend who wants to take me to Gates Barbecue. And Gates is fine, I guess, but it's so stressful when you go order there because they start yelling at you as soon as you walk through the door, and they just yell at you until you place your order. And it just puts me on edge for the entire meal.
Oh, God.
There's another barbecue place that everyone recommends to me, and I cannot for the life of me think of it right now, but I know last year when we wanted to go, it was a 4.5 hour wait. So that would be just as stressful as people yelling at me when I come through the door. So we went to Gates. But I'm open to recommendations. If there's a place I need to go, then I need, please tell me this. Even though North Carolina is by far the superior barbecue. North Carolina barbecue is the Nimrod to Kansas City's Bastion barbecue. So it is absolutely the superior version.
God.
But
that was the best.
That's an analogy I have.
Oh boy.
I'm just.
But I'm open to trying. I like Bastion just fine, but we all can agree that Nimrod was a cooler character before he got the goatee.
I'll just throw this out. If you're in the let's say Western Missouri area, not necessarily Kansas City proper, but if you're ever in a little town called Sedalia, Missouri, go to Little Bighorn Barbecue. It is fantastic. I got for work. Right. I get out there a little bit. And I tell you what, it is very good stuff.
What's the name of this place again? Little Bighorn?
Little Bighorn.
All right, that's only 2 hours from me, so I might have to go try it sometime.
Ain't too bad.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up all of this. So, Cullen, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find you online, and what do you got going on?
Yeah, so right now you can, the best place to find me is, my website, real easy to remember. It's just cullenbunn.com. And my Twitter account, which is where I'm most active on social media, is just at Cullen Bunn. So both of those places are great, places to reach me and get in touch with me and see what's going on. As I mentioned earlier, I got a new book coming out from Boom called Bone Parish. I also have a new Marvel book coming out soon called As Guardians of the Galaxy, which is just what it sounds like. Yeah. And yeah, so and hopefully, listen, hopefully I'll talk to you guys again. I've made it very clear at Marvel that I would write X-Men until the day I die if that's in the cards in some capacity. So maybe who knows if my time is I know X-Men Blue is wrapping up, but that doesn't necessarily mean my time with X-Men is done. But so hopefully there'll be reason for me to come back and visit with you again soon.
Yeah, we would. Yep, absolutely.
We would love that.
Now, people, if you enjoyed this show and you want to, see what else we got, you can go over to XavierFiles.com. That's where I've got all the articles, other interviews that have been done, stuff. I don't know. There's a lot of X-Men stuff that I've been doing for like 3 years, and for the life, it's just all there. You can have a lot of thoughts about X-Men on that website. There's a list of people who vape on the X-Men. It's very extensive. So you can go check out all that. If you want to support the the Xavier Files Media Empire, or more specifically this Battle of the Atoms show, you can go over to patreon.com/Xavier Files, pitch in whatever you want or nothing. It's okay. We've got enough to handle hosting, I think, ad infinitum. But at the $2 a month level, you can suggest one story that we will build an entire episode around. Like next week, where we're going to be building an entire episode around a story about Wolverine yelling cocaine into the middle of the air for no good reason. I've never read that Wolverine story. That's the only bit of context I have for it. And then you can also find me at Xavier Files on Twitter. Hey, Adam, where can people find you online?
Guys, you can always follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy. And if anybody wants a copy of the Bishan Jubes issue number 3, you can just go to adamrec.bigcartel.com. They're $1. I will print it and mail it to you for that $1. No strings attached. So if you haven't already ordered your copy, go ahead and do it.
That is great. Well, like I said, next week we've got Wolverine stories about yelling cocaine in the air, and we got Sam Keith drawing a big Wienermobile. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting episode. But till then, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get